Hi, everyone. This is Bruce Bewell with Synapse Energy Economics, and you are logged into the third Thursday webinar on energy environmental policy analysis. I've got just a couple minutes, maybe 2 minutes of introductory logistical kinds of things, and then we're going to turn it over to Charlie Komanoff. So we've done about a half a dozen of these webinars. They are recorded, and so if you want to hear the prior topics, nuclear power, modeling ambitious clean energy policies, extreme events and climate risk and finance, go to the website and have a look. During this webinar, you will be muted, but you can still ask questions, and we hope you do. So if you have logistical questions about how the webinar, features of the webinar, you can use the chat feature in the WebEx software. If you have substantive questions for our presenter, please email them to webinar@synapse-energy.com, and we'll field those questions and combine them and pose them, and so we hope there's an active Q&A session, even though y'all are on mute. Upcoming webinars, mark your calendar. Next month, the third Thursday is March 15th. So same time, same third Thursday. We have not picked a topic yet. We may stick with transportation and do something about electric vehicles or CAFE standards. So we're doing some interesting stuff. We may do the cost of energy efficiency. There's also been some interest in grid reliability and resiliency, maybe with case studies. Puerto Rico seems to be of a lot of interest. But if any of those pique your interest, join in or let us know. Or if you know presenters or things that you in particular like us to focus on, shoot us an email. The webinar@synapse-energy.com email address is continually live, so we'll keep looking at it. So you can ask your questions today during the webinar, after the webinar. You can tell us what you like or don't like, and so on. You can offer to present. The idea here is to get a little more technical, or maybe a lot more technical than your usual presentations, where we really roll up our sleeves, look at the models, open the hood, look inside. What is the spreadsheet tool or the simulation model or the data? Let's look at the data and the analysis. Today, we're going to look at Charlie Komanoff's transportation analysis model and its application to New York City and congestion pricing. So let's pass the screen over to Charlie Komanoff so he can drive the spreadsheet.
Hi, Bruce. And thank you and Bridget, if you've passed the baton to me. We are going to talk about modeling, but before we do that, I want to set the stage with respect to congestion pricing. In a minute, I'm going to talk about sort of what that is, but I first want to say, and I think the reason that we're really all here today, is that congestion pricing is in play in New York City. And it began to be there 6 months ago yesterday when New York State Governor Andrew Cuomo announced his support for the concept of congestion pricing for New York. He then appointed a task force, a panel of experts and civic leaders that he called Fix NYC. Here is the cover of their report, which was released almost a month ago. And how it came about that the governor became an acolyte of congestion pricing is fascinating, but it's not really our story, except to say that the traffic gridlock in Midtown Manhattan is the worst in just about anyone's memory, and the subway service throughout the city is the worst that it's been in a generation. And there are many causes, but it seems to be agreed upon that there needs to be a new revenue stream for public transportation in New York City, and congestion pricing can provide that. At the same time, it thins the amount of traffic so that it can address, congestion pricing can, the gridlock crisis on the streets and the subway breakdowns below the streets. But today we're going to talk. Sorry.
Excuse me, Charlie. We can't see your screen. I think you need to click on something to make it live.
Sorry, I thought we had this set up. So you're not seeing anything I've got here, huh?
Not yet.
Okay, so I'm at the WebEx thing. I see that I'm the speaker. Is there something that I should have clicked on? And I apologize for not having done this before.
If you go to share up in the
yes,
top,
I got it.
And then
now,
application.
Got it.
And then if you're going to the Excel file of the workbook, then you can just click Excel.
I see.
There it is. Okay. Thanks, Charlie.
Great. And can we get rid of that Synapse Energy sort of section on the top there? Maybe I can, well, I can move that. Yes, I can move that out of the way. Okay. So this is the cover of the Cuomo panel report released last month. And the consultants who pretty much produced that report relied for their quantification on the spreadsheet model that we're going to talk about today, which I've been developing for a decade. It's called the Balanced Transportation Analyzer, or the BTA. So the second preliminary is to look at this map, and this is sort of the southern half of Manhattan, and from the southern tip, the Battery, up to 60th Street, with the southern border of Central Park, is considered the Manhattan Central Business District, or CBD. And everyone who proposes congestion pricing agrees that it should be targeting. That means charging only car and truck trips into the CBD, and trips for hire vehicles, which are yellow cabs and Ubers, et cetera, within the CBD, or perhaps within a somewhat extended district to the north. Now, why just target trips into or within the CBD? Well, 4 reasons. 1, it has the worst congestion. 2, it's physically easy to administer tolls. 3, there are excellent transit options, or there were until the subway started breaking down chronically in the last few years. And 4, and maybe most subtly, is that trips that people make within the Central Business District are so valuable to the people making them that most of those trips will continue to be made in the face of the toll, which will generate significant revenues. So we kind of want to be in a sweet spot where through congestion pricing, we eliminate maybe 15% or a little bit more of all the traffic circulating here. That will improve travel flow immensely, and we quantify that. But the remaining 80 or 85% of trips will remain, they'll survive, and they will be tolled or they will be surcharged, and that will generate revenue. So that's our primer. Let's go to the home page of the spreadsheet. So hopefully you're seeing colors. Yeah, I like colors. There are 72 tabs or worksheets within the BTA. It requires a table of contents. And by clicking on this link here, or we could just go right down there, but I'll click on the link, and it'll take us to the table of contents, which, yes, I've color-coded it into various sections. So there's the title page, here's the table of contents. Let's click on results, because this is the payoff of congestion pricing for New York City, according to the model. And you're seeing lots of stuff here, and we're going to be talking about the blue box, the green box, the brown box, et cetera. But first, let's look at these gray boxes, or mostly gray, which show 6 different plans that are kind of packaged or prepackaged plans that I've assembled within the BTA spreadsheet. One is baseline, simply it's a check on me as a programmer to make sure that I'm replicating current conditions. Then there are 3 versions of the Fix NYC plans, which were laid out in menus in that report that we looked at the cover of a minute ago. And then there are 2 versions of the Move New York plan. And we're going to cover those, although rather quickly. In fact, we're really just going to look at 2 plans. We're going to look at the plan number 3, the Fix NYC higher range plan that has some fairly steep tolls to drive into the CBD and surcharges for the for-hire vehicles. And then the Move New York plan with variable tolls, and that's the one that the spreadsheet is running now. And this little pull-down menu is how you could switch back and forth. So I've just switched to the higher Fix NYC higher range plan. All these numbers up here shifted somewhat because now we're running plan number 3 instead of plan number 6. But I think I'm going to go back to plan number 6. It doesn't really matter. The numbers shifted again. Each of these plans is embodied by a set of programmed inputs. And we're going to go to this tab here called User Inputs, which is pretty long, and we're not going to look at every item, but I want you to see that these are the same sort of 6 boxes. These inputs here in this column, and that column goes way down. I'm only going like a quarter of the way down the tab. These inputs refer to or embody plan number 3. The inputs in column 6 embody this column. And here in this column, the red one, these cells are a series of if statements. Actually, the if is sort of right up there in the bar that selects or puts into this red cell the option or the scenario that is put in play, which happens to be the Move New York plan with variable tolls, or option number 6. We'll look at, so here are the tolls for option number 6, and these are the tolls that would be charged in each direction. So it would be $6 round trip in the middle of the night here. It would be $15, that's 750 times 2, for the daytime hours on weekdays, and then other charges on weekends. These are parameters that the creator of the Move New York plans, that's Gridlock Sam Schwartz, a fellow New Yorker of mine, that he devised with a little bit of input from me. We can scroll down here and see, well, for example, these red items here, that means negative dollars, these are reductions in tolls on the MTA bridges, which don't feed traffic into the heart of Manhattan. And these reductions are part of the policy option envisioned in the Move New York plans, which are 5 and 6, but not in the Fix NYC plans, which are 2, 3, and 4, which is why those are all zeros. There are all of these options here, these yellow things, refer to how we might surcharge yellow cabs. All of these cells in purple are how we might surcharge, or the governor and the legislature would surcharge Ubers and Lyfts within the CBD. Lots of variables here. We're down to like past row 200, but let's take this back to the top. And so that's just taking you a little bit inside. Let's go back to results. And we're going to look at these 5 outputs. And we're actually going to start with this one in green, which is the net revenue that is predicted by the model to be produced every year annually by the scenario or the plan that the model is now running, which is this one, the Move New York plan with variable tolls. And so a lot of zeros, I know, that's about $1.5 billion a year. And this is a graphical depiction of where those revenues come from. Again, just for this particular plan, if we change the plan that the model is running, all of these bars are going to change. These are the revenues that the model predicts we would get from the tolls to drive into the CBD. This negative here is the deadweight cost or loss from operating the toll system. This is what it would cost to lower the tolls on the bridges in the outer boroughs. That's strictly a political ploy, I should say. That's the sort of sweetener to try to sell congestion pricing to people who live in those further out parts of New York City. These are various revenues. We're not going to have time to go too deep into them. Well, this is if subway service improves, because revenues can be invested in the subways, more people will take them. The turnstiles will click more people will buy the monthly Metro cards. That's the estimate of the revenue. This is the revenue that would come from yellow cabs. This is from Ubers. Again, this is simply according to the particular plan that we're running. We'll skip this item, and this is the net. So that's the breakdown. We haven't talked about where those numbers really come from for this amount of money. And maybe, Bruce, maybe I should sort of swallow for a minute, and before we go to the next boxes, just sort of how are we doing?
Doing great. Questions so far include, this is about trucks and cars and vehicles for hire, but what about other sorts of vehicles like motorcycles or bikes or e-bikes and that kind of thing? Do they figure into the policy or the model in any way?
Yeah, they do. I have to admit that motorcycles are so underused in New York City that I don't know that there's a sort of explicit treatment of them. So I think we're just going to kind of pass over that for now. Bicycles would not be charged under this. And trucks, well, it depends. The governor's panel wants to charge all trucks, regardless of size, the same toll, which would be more than double the car toll. With the Move New York plan, we have a graduated axle program that would be based on the number of axles, which is part of the registration, and so it's part of the easy pass that a commercial vehicle or truck would have, because we think that that's more proportionate to the damage to the pavement and the congestion in the air, et cetera, that the trucks are causing. But those are kind of details that are much less important than the general principle of charging vehicles being driven in and charging the Ubers and the yellows, which I should say would not be charged when they cross into the cordon, but because they have GPS and can be wired up to a toll authority, the Ubers and Lyfts and yellows would be charged only, but it's a lot, for the time and miles that they travel within the taxi zone, which might be the same as the CBD or extend a little bit further north. Okay, let's pick up. This is one of my favorite features here, and the idea here is how much of the total new revenue, however many millions or billions of dollars a year it is, from Ubers, cabs, and cars and trucks, would Manhattan residents be paying? Now, why is this important? 10 years ago, when then Mayor Mike Bloomberg proposed congestion pricing for New York City, well, there were lots of objections, not surprising when something big and new is proposed, but the most virulent and maybe kind of the most profound was the perception, grounded in reality, that under the Bloomberg plan, that Manhattan residents who would be getting big benefits because it's their streets that would have the biggest reductions in car and truck traffic, that Manhattanites weren't going to be paying very much compared to residents of the outer boroughs. And that alone killed it politically 10 years ago, Bloomberg's congestion pricing. So what I've done here, and I'm going to actually click on, you see here I've even got some links in this spreadsheet. Click on incidents, which means who pays. And this pie chart purports to show for the plan we're looking at, which is, and you know what, guys, I'm actually going to switch this. I'm going to go back to results, and I'm going to switch to one of the plans embodied in the Fix NYC report. Oops, I clicked the one I didn't want to click. It's, oh, no, it is this one. And let's go back to that pie chart. no, you may have seen, if your eye was quick, you know, that obviously the pie slices change depending upon which plan we're running. And what this is showing, and I think this is politically necessary, is that residents of Manhattan collectively would be paying per year, this is in millions of dollars, folks, almost $500 million in new, mostly Ubers and cabs, and to some extent their cars being driven back into the district when they come from a borough or from the Hamptons or, you know, whatever. In fact, under this particular version of the Fix NYC plans from the governor's panel, Manhattan residents would be paying more collectively than residents of Queens, Brooklyn, and Staten Island. So we think this is good politics if we can sell this to residents of Manhattan. But again, I don't want to get too focused on the politics. I want to show more what the model outputs are. And what we're seeing here is that, in fact, Manhattan residents would be paying almost as much under this plan as the combined residents of the other 4 boroughs of New York City. This is what residents of the so-called MTA, that's our public transit authority, would 7 suburban counties that make up the whole MTA district, they would be paying 17% of the total. New Jersey and Connecticut would be paying about 13 or 14%. So these numbers are helpful. Next, we're actually about to go to my favorite part of my spreadsheet, the predicted annual net benefit, a cost benefit of this particular plan, which is plan number 3 here. So let's click on this link. Actually, that went to the details of the plan, but here's our graphic. And you know, they say an economist is somebody who knows the price of everything but the value of nothing. I might dispute that, but I have in this model monetized everything that I can lay my mouse on that would change as a result of doing congestion pricing. I've quantified the changes and then slapped whether it's the value of an hour of saved time, the value of a life extended or not lost due to being run over or in a collision or due to dirty air, you know, et cetera, et cetera. Let's sort of go through a few of those. But the striking thing here, and by the way, the net benefit predicted here is over $3 billion. And what that is saying, in effect, if we divide that by 365 days a year, we get about $9 million a day. And so what I would be saying, anyway, to a wonky audience like you guys, is that the city of New York, by not having congestion pricing, is leaving on the table benefits worth $9 million every single day. And what are those benefits? They're not environmental. This is the reduction in noise pollution. This is fewer people being injured or run over and killed by drivers. This is cleaner air. And it's not that big. If this were 1970 and we could do electronic tolling, in 1970s tailpipes, this blue bar would be way up to here. But tailpipe emissions from cars, and this is the carbon reductions. And I find it ironic in a kind of gleeful way to me, because in my other day job, I run the Carbon Tax Center. I kind of get off on the fact that the carbon benefits of congestion pricing, the immediate ones, are fairly small. This is not a climate plan, except insofar as it makes cities work better, and we need cities to be even more the center of settlement and industry and commerce because they're inherently green. But this is not a plan that puts a lot of car tailpipes out of action. It's a plan that makes the city run better, and these are the time savings for transit riders, and these are the time savings for drivers. Wellness is my estimate of the extended lives of the increased numbers of people who are going to walk and bike because there's less traffic. Anyway, we could go on, but if you total all these up and if you net the user fees and count the unspent revenue, which is revenue not yet invested in transit, it's kind of a reserve, we get these net benefits of more than $3 billion a year. And maybe at the end, the last thing I might want to do if we have time before questions is explore what is traveler's amenity, which is a negative feature here because it's kind of a cool feature of the spreadsheet.
Well, Charlie, a couple questions now, if we could.
Yeah.
So you have a value for saved time here. How do you estimate that? Is it different for say transit riders, drivers, trucks and cargo? And then again, I want you to roll in the bikes if you could, or because there is, in this scenario there's less congestion and therefore better use of the city for two-wheeled vehicles, correct?
Bruce, in another kind of reverse psychology, and you know that I'm a big bike advocate and a daily bicyclist. The bicycling features in this model are rudimentary at best. It's almost as if I didn't want to be in a position or be put in a position of saying, oh, we're going to do this because bike riders benefit, or even that there are going to be more people biking. So leave bikes out of it. But the answer is yes. There are different, I have slapped on different values of a saved hour of time or an hour lost in traffic congestion, depending upon whether it's on weekends versus weekdays, time saved within the heart of Manhattan, the CBD, which is more valuable than time saved outside of it, and that's sort of what this is. A lot of driver time is going to be saved approaching the central business district, on the approaches, and that's this. And I valued those hours individually at less than the hours saved per hour of drivers within the CBD because incomes are higher and trip purposes tend to be weightier. So that's my kind of genuflection to the to the market system. And there's differences between cars with carpools and non-carpools, big trucks, little trucks, buses. I mean, and there's a whole tab to the spreadsheet here. We're not going to stop and look at it, but you can find it here somewhere. Where is it? It's value of time. Here it is. That parses all that stuff.
So two more quick questions on the valuation, and then I'll let you move on. If that's okay. One is on the trucks. You got big trucks, little trucks, medium trucks. There's an issue of do you use axles like your proposal, or weight? Because weight apparently affects road wear and so on. Is there any optimization there? Or?
No. Again, this is just sort of the value of time. If we make the traffic flow better, I've got the hours saved for truckers separate from private car drivers and for-hire vehicle users. And the trucks, I think I separated them only into two types. The 18-wheelers, which are,
but then on the fee side, you make a distinction, right?
Yeah, the fee, there's that distinction. But to add up, even there are limits to which, beyond which even I will not go to try to, how many angels can dance on the head of a pin.
Okay, and then on the carbon emissions, I know that's not the big item here, but we've been asking, what price per ton do you use?
Sorry, I use $50 per ton, which is approximately $50 per ton more than the prices, in effect in U.S. policy. I know there's a few minor shining examples, and the carbon reductions come in two ways. One is fewer tailpipes. And the other is the tailpipes that remain will be slightly less polluting of CO2 because they're going to have higher gasoline mileage because there will be less stop-and-go traffic. And all of this stuff is parameterized. The whole thing is beautifully interactive. And if we were running this on, Excel 1985 or Lotus 123, it would probably take minutes to recalculate every scenario. But as you've seen, it takes about 1/10 of a second. Okay?
Yeah, great.
Okay, so let's go back to results. Oops, I've got my own thing in the way here. How do we get rid of that? Oh, no, I lost the, here we are. Okay, we're going to skip on the daily traveler time savings, because these hours are subsumed in here. In fact, if anybody has a better idea of something that I should be putting in here, this is very valuable real estate here, your ad here. But now we're going to go deep in, do a deep dive, and see how did I calculate or how would you calculate with your own, with the other scenarios or your own parameters? You know, you can take any of these scenarios and you can play with them. And in fact, the funny thing is that if you were to put in tolls of like $100 to drive into the heart of the city instead of the maximum of $11.50 and then less in the off-peak periods, you would find the net benefits would be less than here, because we would have eliminated so much traffic that we'd be cutting into you know, muscle and bone of what it is that makes a city function in terms of people being able to get around, and part of that is yet by private car. But let's see how we came to this almost 20% predicted average change in vehicle speeds in the heart of Manhattan on weekdays. And notice this little caveat: 5 years out when transit investments have borne fruit. And we're going to play around with that a little bit later. But let's go. We're sort of at about the halfway point here. We've just gone to another tab. And if this flow chart looks like plumbing, well, friends, we're going to get deep into plumbing for the next half dozen minutes or so. This worksheet has 1,200 rows and 68 columns. And we divide the traffic in the city, in the city, into 3 types of car trips. Car trips for work, car trips that are not for work, that might be, you know, going to theater or a restaurant or a shopping trip or culture or whatever. Through trips, which now let's see, why are the through trips empty in that one? I don't know. Well, maybe we'll sort of stay here. That's sort of weird that got zeroed out. Well, okay, here we go. And then taxi cab. Oh yeah, because I only here do I separate the through trips from auto work and auto non-work. And then yellow cabs, and Ubers and Lyfts, and trucks and buses that I had to combine because I ran out of real estate here. And what you'll see here is that, and then I divide the trips into 7 time periods. You know, the graveyard shift, afternoon and evening peak, which is from 2 to 8. And I do that for the 6 different types of trips. These columns are auto trips for work, and then auto trips for non-work, and then out there is auto through trips, you know, blah, blah, blah. And there are different speeds. These are the average speeds in the 7 different time periods on weekdays. This is 20 miles an hour in the graveyard shift, approximately the same in this little silly column. I don't know why I did that, 10 years ago, just 5 to 6 a.m. And it goes down to 6.9 miles an hour average in the entire central business district during the 6-hour-long afternoon and evening peak. And maybe if we have time or in the questions, we'll talk about how I derive those numbers. They all pivot off of this number, 8.21, which is the city DOT's estimate for the average speed of traffic within the Manhattan Central Business District from 8 in the morning until 6 in the evening on a typical weekday. And basically, I took different traffic densities in each of these 7 periods and ran them through a formula that produces, based on this average, the average for all 24 hours, it produces what the averages had to be in each of the 7 periods in order to come up with this average, which is an empirical number. And then we put on the cordon tolls. Let's see, we are running the Fix, we're running one of the Fix NYC plans. Well, first we have to figure out what does it cost now without these tolls to drive into the central business district. And it varies by every hour or every period of the day, because if you drive in the middle of the night, you can find a place to park for free pretty much, but not if you drive in the middle of the day, unless you're a placard abuser, another interesting issue, but we don't have time to go there. And we need to specify the baseline prices for auto trips for non-work, for through trips, for truck trips, etc. The reason we have to specify them is because the tolls that we put on, and I'm finally getting to the tolls. The Fix NYC plan would not charge a toll in the middle of the night. It would not charge it until 6 in the morning, and then it would charge a toll which for some reason comes out to be $8.76, and I believe that that's after, here's kind of the formula for it up there. That's after I've had to deduct the fact that we are not going to be tolling trips coming from New Jersey, a small but significant percentage in the Hudson River tunnels, because those trips are already tolled by a different agency. We're not going to be adding tolls to the Queens Midtown Tunnel and the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel because, well, those are already tolled. So we have to slice those things off. And so the $11.50 nominal toll in this plan during those hours becomes this much. And we then ratio what is the implied increase in the price to drive, and we run that through a price elasticity power function, which then predicts that we're going to lose, and I'm looking for the place where we have that. I think it's in row 365, that we're going to keep 91% of those work trips, because work trips aren't all that elastic, which means we're going to lose only 9% of them. But the non-work trips, which are here, we're going to keep only 87% of them. The through trips, we're going to keep only 85% of them, and we could sort of talk about why those numbers are different. But then we collect the changes in the amount of travel. Those then imply different traffic speeds, and those might be somewhere here. We also have to do time of day stuff and how many trips come or are lost because taxis are less or more expensive, because the subways work better after there's been some investment, because buses work better, because travel is faster. And here are the speeds after we've put in the tolls, and they're kind of higher. This is the afternoon and evening peak. Instead of 6.9 miles an hour, it's suddenly 9.1 miles an hour, and corresponding increases for the other times of day. But what happens as a result of that, with congestion pricing making the roads go faster, is we get into what I call Yogi Berra territory. And now I'm going to the bottom, or near the bottom of this row. You can see it of this tab. It's almost 1,200 lines long, and the idea of the rebound effect, that we start with this many trips into or through the central business district every day. We put on congestion pricing, and that has dropped. So then what happens the next day? Madge turns to Melvin, from Brooklyn or Scarsdale, and says, honey, there was no traffic yesterday because of that congestion charge. Let's drive in today. So they drive in, but then what happens as a result is that traffic is now more crowded, not as bad as it was originally, but better than it was on the first day. So some of those trips disappear. That's the Yogi Berra. It's so crowded, no one goes there. And we have to run, here's maybe a better graph of that. This is the oscillations from the first iteration, the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth, and the sixth. It's the rebound effect shown graphically. And I literally put the price elasticity and the time elasticity calculations through 10 cycles before it the pendulum swing stops and we reach equilibrium. And the equilibrium that we reach is, actually one more thing here. Yeah, here it is. The speed increases. There's almost no speed increase in the middle of the night because we don't really toll that. I think the only reason for the speed increase is because there's a bit of a surcharge on yellows and Ubers, although not as high, during the graveyard shift. Worse traffic from 5 to 6 in the morning because some people, not that many, but some will shift. People who now drive from between 6 and 7 in the morning, some of them will shift to an earlier period to avoid paying the toll. And yeah, there's a time shifting elasticity for that. But look at the improvements in travel speeds during the times that it matters most. These are the improvements within the CBD. These are the improvements, less but still something to write home about, on the approaches to the CBD. And when we add all that up, you know, or let Excel add it up, we get a 20% increase in travel speeds within the central business district, somewhat less on the approaches. But, and I know this is sort of a long sequence, Bruce, in a moment I'm going to turn it back to you, but I've got to be candid about something. This is what's predicted, I say 5 years out. Who really knows exactly how long? When the transit investments have borne fruit, because you're not going to be able to get the subways working better instantaneously. It's going to take time to intelligently, let's hope, invest the congestion revenues in making the trains work better. So let's see, and this is again the last part of the last riff in this part of my talk, what this 19.8% is going to be overnight. So we have to go to user inputs, and we are in this column here. This is scenario number 3. You see how the 1,300, which is $1,300 million a year, $1.33 billion almost, that got picked up by the if statement here. I'm going to actually zero that out. Put enter. You see how now, you know, this number is going to be shared throughout the, well, actually it only goes to a few places, but it's a pretty potent thing. And now let's go back to results. And wow, what used to be a 19.8% travel speed improvement is only 11%. What used to be predicted net benefits of $3.3 billion is only $1.4 billion, because we're not having the transit system run better, improve travel times for transit users, and pull more drivers out of their cars, so that in a second round that takes time, this goes to 19.8%. And the last thing I'll show in this part is the save time. Remember, we had a nice big bar here that was save time for transit users. It disappears. They're not saving time because we've zeroed out the feedback loop that puts the money back into the transit system that, you know, we don't really have time to go into. So these time savings are only for the people on the buses, and they'll save time because with fewer cars to compete, the buses are going to move them more quickly. Anyway, I'm going to hit Control Z, which changes that that alteration I made, or did it? Let's try that again. Yeah, it should have. Oh no, it moved. There we go. No, sorry, got to go to. I guess it didn't work. So let me just put this back in at the $1,300 million a year. Here's our save time for transit. And Bruce, let me pipe down for a moment.
Yeah, so we got a number of questions. Several are around the technology to collect these fees, and so, you know, kind of how would that work? Do you have the costs for that technology in here? And might it have other benefits like preventing illegally large vehicles from entering this central business district?
Great question. Yeah, the cordon, how much it costs to erect, and then how much it costs each year to administer the tolling system. That's the that is here, CBD toll administration costs, which the model is predicting for this option is a negative number. It's $120 million a year. If we were to switch to one of the Move New York plans, which involves tolling at half rate in both directions, the cost is greater. This is a larger negative number because there will be more transactions. But the key thing is that we've got one of these 72 tabs, we're not going to go there, is called cordon, and it's got in microscopic detail, as you might imagine, what it will cost to build the system. I amortize it a straight line over 5 years. Then we've got transactions, adjudication costs, the CPU, you know, the whole bit. So, you know, that's built in here, and in fact, that's this toll and fare administration. As to being able to detect, you know, oversized vehicles, I got to say, guys, the City of New York, the NYPD, have that ability already, and basically, they could care less about making sure that illegally oversized vehicles don't operate outside of designated truck routes. And we will probably have congestion pricing by block and by hour and everything else before we have an NYPD that takes traffic danger seriously.
So changing gears a bit, one participant asked whether anyone can transform the spreadsheet into an online platform that's more user-friendly. And I think it's super friendly to you, Charlie. But for others, I think the answer is yes. Anyone could do that because it's available, correct? And
yeah, I'm sorry, I should have said at the beginning. The spreadsheet is it's on the web. You know, there's the link, and if you didn't have the link, you could just Google, you know, BTA or Komanoff BTA or whatever, and you'll get to the link. That's the good news. You know, you can all download it and do your own thing. The bad news, Bruce, I mean, every few weeks I get some great person approaching me with the same interest. The problem is that this spreadsheet is not static. I am having to change it all the time. I probably have on my hard drive like 3,000 different versions of this because, you know, and I have to change it because baseline travel volumes change, baseline traffic speeds change. Different people, whether from, you know, the governor's office or other elected officials or, you know, advocates, are asking, well, you know, how about policy option XYZ? And then I try to program that in. And nobody's been able to figure out yet how to have an app-based, you know, or mobile representation of this that is connected to a dynamic underlying Excel spreadsheet. And if any of you out there think you can do it, like write me, you know, right away. You know, I'm going to be like all over you, you know, to help you make that happen. And here's my info here. You know, email Komanoff@gmail.
So one of the great things about Excel models is they can start, you know, really small and modest, and then, you know, develop over time, and I guess into, you know, bigger and more complicated things. And one of the questions I have about in this particular case, Charlie, is like when you started into this, you know, what did you have in mind? What were you expecting? And how is this result? I won't call it the end result. This version that we're looking at today, that will probably continue to evolve. You know, how is this different from what you expected? And you know, would you do anything differently in terms of design?
Yeah. Well, okay. The biggest thing I would do differently is I would have 24 hours for you know, the traffic instead of shoehorning 24 hours into 7 bins. And it would make the spreadsheet, you know, even that more unwieldy, but I think it would be worth it in terms of its power. When I first did this, I didn't even think that I could do time of day stuff. And, you know, over lunch one day with a colleague, it suddenly hit me how I could do that. And yeah, you know, there's a lot more I'd love to do, but you know, right now, and I should say I made a lot of changes in October, November, December after the governor's task force's consultants approached me and said, like, maybe I should have said a little bit more about this at the outset. They said, you know, we want to use your model because it's transparent, it gives results quickly, we can manipulate it, and all that. But we're going to benchmark it at some point against the $100 million official regional, you know, transportation planning model. And when they did that in December, what they said, and this is according to the governor's assistant secretary for transportation, that the agreement between the two models was remarkable. And when he said that, like, I had about 10 years worth of smile on my face. It sort of you know, suggested to me, I mean, politically, it was worth doing all this because of the use to which the model is being put. But to have the work confirmed in that way, you know, obviously, it's a great validation. Awesome.
So one question about the who's paying the fees and benefits is, what if you live in the central business district? What if you're a resident of this area? Do you pay the fees, and how does this look to you?
Well,
In fact,
yeah.
you are, aren't you?
Yeah, I am. Actually, the main way this is going to affect me is that when I have to reserve, and I do this like 3 or 4 times a year, a large sport utility vehicle, and I ride my bicycle from Lower Manhattan out to LaGuardia where the rentals are cheap, and I drive back in, I guess I'll be paying, you know, to drive back in a way that I don't have to do now if I go on one of the free bridges. But most people who live south of 60th Street, you know, within the charging zone, their charges are going to be much more for the Ubers and the yellow cabs, because maybe 60% of Uber trips that use the taxi zone or the central zone are by Manhattan residents, and that figure is 70% for yellow cabs. That's kind of programmed in here. So that's the main way that people who live within the district are going to be charged. But yeah, you know, if you've got a vacation house, or if you teach at a school in Brooklyn and you drive out there, you know, every day, when you come back in, you know, you're going to pay a toll if you're driving on one of the bridges, you know, that's now free, but are going to be tolled under this plan.
So we have a number of questions about kind of other places, and I guess I'll start with kind of what other, you know, locations are thinking of or implementing these kind of policies?
Well, you know, I'm going to be brutally honest that this, you know, pointing that people like I do to Singapore 1975, London 2003, Stockholm 2007 as, you know, the world cities that have implemented congestion pricing, you know, Bruce, it's getting kind of old. Because they're, yeah, Rome does some version, or not Rome, Milan, and 1 or 2 cities in Norway. But, you know, this has not caught on like wildfire, which I think, you know, it's a testament to a lot of things, including, I think, you know, the power of entitlements, where that old saying, it could have come from Machiavelli, he didn't quite say it this way, that losers cry louder than winners sing. And we've got millions of potential winners here. I mean, if you even leave aside how drivers, you know, man with van, if I can use that sexist term, you know, they're going to benefit because they'll be able to cover 6 work sites within Manhattan rather than 5 in a typical day, and you know, they'll get another 50 or 100 bucks in their pocket, so that'll, you know, easily pay for the congestion charge. But it's subway and transit users and people who don't use the subways regularly, which means most of you from around the country, and elected officials in New York City and state who are chauffeured around from the mayor on down. They have this windshield perspective. They just don't grasp the sheer numbers of people who rely on the subway system and who will benefit, again, assuming that the congestion revenues can be intelligently invested. So I wish I could say that this is, you know, sweeping the world. I will say that if New York City goes with congestion pricing, based on the 2 trips where I was brought to China in the past decade to talk about, you know, congestion pricing and modeling, I think that it's then going to take off in scores of cities in China, you know, maybe in India, et cetera, although by that time we're going to have such digital technology that instead of a binary toll where you pay the whole thing if you cross in, but you pay nothing if you don't, it's going to be much more nuanced, which will be fairer and more efficient.
So what are the looking forward, what are the characteristics of a city that make it a attractive prospect for this kind of policy?
A vibrant central area, a central business district, that into which, you know, a lot of people drive and clog up the roads and aggravate themselves and each other, and whose trips, in fact, whose ability to use a car to drive into that area, whose trips are so valuable to the people taking them that they will continue to drive most of them in the face of the toll, generating revenues, and you know, a small number, a fraction of the trips will disappear, and that's where we get our traffic improvement.
this is a impressive effort at quantifying impacts and costs and benefits, and analyzing policy quantitatively. And there's a general question around kind of stepping out. Like how effective is that? How relevant is that? What the whole idea of does data matter? Do facts matter? And how do you think about that these days, Charlie?
Oh yeah, easy answer. Necessary but not sufficient. This quantification by this model having been used in the governor's panel's report, has been really critical. You can't propose something as momentous as congestion charging, without something like this. But at least as important is a whole series of parallel analyses that this spreadsheet has nothing to do with, that demonstrate that from an income progressive standpoint, in terms of economic fairness, that poor people and working families and working people will stand to benefit greatly from this, by orders of magnitude. For every one person of modest means who now drives into the city on a regular basis, and there aren't that many of those people because they can't afford the parking, that there are 20 or 30 or 40 who will benefit because subway service is going to improve. And that even begs the question of drivers getting benefits in terms of saving time. So that quantification has been critical. But, more than anything else, it ultimately, comes down to politics. Politics are bigger than data. I just came here from a meeting of about 40 advocates, at the office of the Riders Alliance in the city, of transportation reform people, the business community, real estate people, the tech community. There's an amazing array of people on board for this, but it's not a given that this, being congestion pricing, is actually going to happen. So, that also is a necessary but not a sufficient condition. Maybe more than anything, it takes trust in the ability of government to deliver, and boy, that sure is in short supply these days.
Do you have any final? We're running out of time. Do you have any final words for the webinar, Charlie?
I think I just gave them. I just want to say, Bruce, thank you, and you and Bridget and all the people at Synapse Energy Economics. You're just great to work with, and I'm on this. Everybody should know, because I loved the December seminar about risk in climate and finance by a brilliant economist named Frank Ackerman, and I raved about it to Bruce, and he reached out to me. So you all come back next month. I'm going to be in the audience with you.
Hey, thanks so much. Same back to you, Charlie. And yeah, and everyone, the videos of Frank's presentation and the other ones are online, as this one will be. So it might take us a day or so, but if you want to watch it again, or share it with your friends, feel free, and encouraged. Please spread this around, and maybe we'll send you the link for the spreadsheet model too, so those of you who want to can. So it'll be easy to just click on it, download the model, and run your own scenarios. See what it looks like. So thanks, Charlie. Thanks, everyone. Talk with you next month, March 15th. If you're signed up for this one, we'll tell you via email what the topic ultimately is. Thanks, everyone. Cheers.